Economics. Until a few years ago, to most of us, this was the name of a rather boring course of study. Today we hear the word often, especially in connection with things like unemployment, interest rates, and inflation. We'd all like to have more money so we could afford more things. Do you think most businesses and governments want more money too? Yes. Economists start with the assumption that individuals and organizations always want to acquire as much as they can of the large but limited amount of available goods and services. Economics is a study of production, the way goods and services are created, and distribution, the way they are divided among users. Economics studies two major processes. One involves what and how goods and services are created. What is this called? Yes. Distribution, the other process, involves who gets how much of these goods and services. Pro basketball players, business executives, typists, waiters, car and oil companies, the corner grocery, and the neighborhood bar. They all consume goods and services. Different nations have different methods for influencing these two economic processes. What are the two processes? Right. In communist and socialist countries, the government owns the principal means of production and decides what and how goods and services are produced. In the United States, many other American and European countries, and Japan, the economy is freer. The United States is a capitalist country. Most means of production are privately owned, and millions of economic decisions are made by individuals and businesses operating in a relatively free market, controlled more by supply and demand than by the government. The consumer makes the basic decisions of which goods and services to buy. These decisions together make up the demand. The supply is provided by producers to meet this demand. Where are business choices freest? Yes. When the demand for a product or service exceeds the supply, both prices and profits are high. These high profits encourage more production, which increases the supply. When the supply exceeds the demand, producers often reduce prices to increase the demand. Producers are free to enter or leave a business, so several producers usually enter a business where the demand is high. This provides competition, which tends to keep prices and thus production costs down. What are two terms economists use frequently? Yes. Small electronic calculators provide a recent example of how competition can affect price in a free market. When they were first introduced, simple calculators sold for $195 and complex ones for $795. There was no government control over their production or sale. Other companies entered the competition, and now simple calculators sell for $7 and complex ones for $95. Wages are also affected by the laws of supply and demand. When the demand for workers in a particular occupation is higher than the supply, wages tend to be higher. When the demand is lower than the supply, wages tend to be lower. workers are free to find the job that pays the best. What results when several companies produce the same product? Yes. The desire to have more makes us work harder at better paying jobs. The desire for profits makes business produce the needed goods and services at the lowest cost. 200 years ago, Adam Smith wrote that this was like an invisible hand, which produced the most at the least cost. The United States does not have pure capitalism, in which the market is completely free. A free market operates according to supply and demand and competition, and government influence is restricted to enforcing criminal and contract laws. Instead, the United States has mixed capitalism. Prices and wages do not fluctuate according to an entirely free market. Adam Smith thought that a free market without government intervention would keep monopolies from developing. A monopoly is a single group that gains such extensive control of a certain product or service that it excludes competition. Does the United States have pure or mixed capitalism? Good. Large corporations can become monopolies temporarily and keep prices high even when demand is low. Unions can keep wages high for a while even when high unemployment causes a surplus of workers. The government can protect competition and support the free market by breaking up monopolies. What does a monopoly eliminate? Yes. A few monopolies seem necessary to ensure that essential public services like utilities and telephone and mail service are uniform and dependable. But even Bell Telephone and the U.S. Postal Services have some competitors, MCI and United Parcel. National governments have become powerful forces affecting our economy. Some government actions, such as monopoly control, help keep the market free. Other government actions interfere with a free market. They include labor and minimum wage laws. Another way a government interferes with a free market is by subsidy. A producer subsidy provides assistance to producers to ensure that a product is plentiful enough. A consumer subsidy, such as a price ceiling, limits a product's price to ensure that consumers can afford it. The long-term results of these government actions are often not what was intended. In the United States, dairy production is subsidized, so dairymen produce more than we use. India has price ceilings on grain to keep costs low in the cities, so farmers don't produce enough grain. What word means government financial assistance to producers or consumers? Right. Most of your own income is salary paid for your work. But if you own money, property, or stock in a company, you can get income from interest, rent, or dividends. Which goes with which? Yes. If you have more income, you can afford a higher standard of living. When the total amount of all incomes received in a country increases, it has a higher national income. 2/3 of the national income is composed of salaries. The rest of national income, you recall, is in the form of interest, rent, and dividends. About what percentage of the national income is for wages and salaries? Yes. You're likely to have more income when the gross national product of goods and services, the GNP, is high and increasing. When the GNP is down considerably for 6 months or more, we have a recession. Economists think of two elements of production: labor and capital. The labor force includes everyone who can work and includes their skills, education, and technical knowledge. Capital goods are materials, equipment, and buildings. A special sort of capital is natural resources such as minerals and timber. What's the GNP? Correct. Capital goods are essential for producing the goods and services a society uses. Consumer goods, such as food and clothing, are not capital goods because they are not used for further production or economic growth. What are the principal elements of economic production? Right. The economy runs in cycles of prosperity, recession or depression, and recovery. During prosperity, the economy is growing rapidly. Wages in the GNP increase and unemployment decreases. During a recession or depression, the GNP decreases and unemployment increases. The economic policies of the federal government, fiscal policy and monetary policy, can have a great influence on the economic cycle. The government's decisions about how much money to spend and how high to set taxes are called fiscal policy. Does production increase or decrease during a recession? Right. Fiscal policy influences monetary policy, the decisions made by the Federal Reserve System, the U.S. Central Bank, affecting the amount of money in circulation. These decisions include how much currency to print and how much money its member banks can lend. When loan money is plentiful, interest rates are low. Since the Depression of the 1930s, most governments have followed the suggestions of British economist J.M. Keynes to help end recessions by adopting a fiscal policy of deficit spending. Deficit spending means spending more money than is received. Does deficit spending increase or decrease the national debt? Good. Lower taxes, more government spending, more currency, and more loans at lower interest rates all put more money into the economy to increase production and employment. This sounds wonderful, but eventually there is a problem: inflation. Inflation means that prices increase and dollars decrease in buying power. Keynes wrote that inflation could be countered by raising taxes and decreasing government spending. But these actions are unpopular with many voters, so governments have been reluctant to follow that part of his theory. This Phillips curve shows that, unfortunately, reducing unemployment and recession tends to increase inflation. Even more unfortunately, unemployment and inflation have increased at the same time during the last decade. We have inflation and recession simultaneously. So government policies meant to lessen one economic evil aggravate the other. During the prosperous 1960s, government manipulation of the economy seemed to promise continual prosperity. But government action, it seemed, often has delayed and unpredictable effects. Even if it is effective in the short run, it often causes inflation and low productivity in the long run. We cannot expect the government to solve all our economic problems. No matter what the government does, our economy is also affected by world events. Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, shocks our economy with enormous price increases for crude oil. Japanese auto firms shock Detroit automakers by producing high-quality, economical cars. Can the long-term effects of government economic policies always be predicted? No, they can't. The United States is more open to international trade than most nations, but it still has a few restrictions on imports, such as tariffs, which are duties or taxes, and quotas, which are limits on the amounts imported. Most American economists recommend essentially unrestricted world trade, but many countries see temporary advantages in certain restrictions. What's the tax on imports called? Yes. You can see that your personal financial situation will, to a large extent, be affected by the national economy. But collectively, all of us affect the economy by working, buying, borrowing, saving, and supporting the government policies that are most useful in the long run.